Hey, it's Raise the Game, school motivational speaker, ADHD study coach. And in this video, we're going to talk about what is ADHD and the 7 things you as a parent of an ADHD teenager need to know to help your teenager navigate school, study, and exams. And the first big thing about ADHD, it's a neurodevelopmental condition. So NC, a neurodevelopmental condition. And what does that mean? Well, neuro means to do with the brain. It's how the brain is actually wired. And developmental, what happens with the ADHD brain, and you have to remember this is all to do with the brain. People ask, where does it come from? Well, actually, a huge part of this is genetics. It's inherited. And study after study, and the GOAT of ADHD research, Russell Berkeley, he would talk about it's a genetic condition. And the types of ADHD, the different types, is basically to do with inattention and also hyperactive impulsive. And for example, I've been diagnosed with the impulsive type. Many people wouldn't have put me down as ADHD because the stereotype is the kid who can't sit still. The stereotype is the kid always getting into trouble. And that's why a lot more boys get diagnosed than girls, because girls tend to mask and then they get diagnosed in later life. And indeed, nowadays, a lot more people are being diagnosed at a later stage in life. Statistics suggest that between 4 to 7% of the population have ADHD, attention deficit hyperactive disorder. It used to be known as ADD, but now in the DSM, the Diagnostical and Statistics Manual, which is basically the Bible for all these different disorders and all around the mental conditions, in that it is defined as a disorder, and it's called ADHD, attention deficit hyperactive disorder. So the 2 different types: inattention. So that's the kid in school who struggles to pay attention, gets distracted very easy, is very hyperactive, and can be impulsive. And the big issue with the ADHD brain is to do with, well, it's a delay. It's a delay, and there's a lag in the brain's ability. So if you can imagine, and what Dr. Russell Berkeley talks about is, you're talking about a 30% delay. So for example, a 15-year-old in many cases can have the brain of a 10-year-old. An 18-year-old can have the brain ability of, say, a 13 or a 15-year-old. And what I mean by brain ability, and it's interesting because this morning I was coaching a student, and when I asked him how did he feel about being diagnosed with ADHD, he said he was quite relieved, because what it meant to him was it was nothing to do with his IQ. He no longer felt stupid. And a lot of ADHD kids feel stupid. They feel not smart enough, not good enough. So it has a massive impact on self-esteem. But in reality, what it's to do with, and what we're really talking about, is this is the core concept with ADHD, is all to do with executive function. And a bit like how an executive runs a company, we're really talking about the part of the brain, the prefrontal cortex up here, the frontal part of the brain that's responsible for things like time management, planning, organizing, self-regulation, self-control, which brings me to this big here. And if you look at Mike McLeod, he has an amazing book, which is called The Executive Function Playbook. He talks about the 4 pillars of executive function. And this is to do with self-awareness. So if your teenager who's got ADHD struggles with friendships, that's often because an ADHD student who's 13 or 14 or 15, maybe they're not popular because they're the ones who are very aggressive in games, or they speak out of turn, and they kind of can be very vocal, and they struggle with social skills and social etiquette. And that's because that part of their brain to do with self-awareness is just, it's just not working properly. It's just not developed yet. And I emphasize the word yet. Self-regulation is another big one. So For me, when I was very younger, very bad temper, hot, a hothead. And ADHDers struggle with self-regulation. And you often see this where your daughter could come home from school, your son could come home from school, teachers will say they're very well behaved, and a bit like the Coke bottle, they fizz up all over the place. So they explode at home. And maybe you've been on the receiving end of temper tantrums, meltdowns, you're walking on eggshells. And, you know, I remember one parent said to me recently, you know, I go to work after being verbally abused. So there can be a lot of violent, I would use that word, violent discourse at home. In some cases, it can get violent verbally and in some cases physically. So this is because, again, it comes back to how the brain is actually wired. Self-motivation is a big issue. And my program, the Raise the Game program in school, it's a motivational study skills program. I motivate them to study. We have to create motivation, that inner fire. The problem for ADHDers is task initiation, to get the study started, to activate the brain. That's very difficult because there's a dopamine deficit. So chemically in the brain, we're struggling. And that's where students can end up on medication to help regulate the emotions and to create drive, motivation. In this video, I'm not going to talk about medication. We'll do that in another video. The other thing then is to do with self-evaluation. And what Dr. Russell Berkeley will talk about is something called hindsight. So for example, if you fail an exam, it's the ability to actually ask yourself, what did I do right? What did I do wrong? How can I improve the next time? It's even to remember, you know, your stuff for school. You know, that's why you're always reminding your kid to pack their bag, to, you know, bring certain books home because they've got homework, or to study, or you have to fly into school with the football boots, and you might say, you know, but the next time, don't forget your football boots. And yet they can't remember the last time they forgot their football boots because they don't have that capacity to self-evaluate. And that word capacity is really important because it's this mental ability to have the capacity to be able to reflect, to be able to plan, to organize, to evaluate, to motivate, all these different selves. The self-evaluation, awareness, regulation, motivation. And again, they're all really, really, really important. And once you as a parent have an understanding of ADHD, what it is, how it impacts the brain, how it impacts your teenager, and why in some cases, if you have a 17-year-old at home, it feels like you're talking to a 12-year-old. They forget things, it's in one ear, it's out the other. And what we're doing here as part of this channel is we're giving you a different understanding of what ADHD is. And once you start to understand, this can be an absolute game changer for your parenting style. And this can help you not to have those arguments and fights. Because once you understand the type of brain that you're dealing with and what actually is going on for your teenager, and when they say things like, I just can't remember, when they say things like, I just forgot, and you get really frustrated, it's like, why can't you just get on with your homework? Why can't you just pack your bag for school? Well, once you understand how the brain actually works, how it impacts that teenager. And the good news is, out of all of this, is that just because we have a delay, just because we have a lag in how the brain is developed, doesn't mean that the brain can't grow. And the good news is, if right now you're in the middle of that battle with your teenager, if you're walking on eggshells at home, if you're struggling to get them into school or to get them to get their homework done or to study for that exam, over time, this can be developed. Over time, this can be built. Over time, this can be wired differently. And that's what I do in my coaching programs. That's what we do in my seminars. And that's what we do as part of the work here. So I hope that helps. I hope you now have a better understanding of what ADHD is. It's a neurodevelopmental condition. It affects the brain. It's genetic. It's to do with hyperactivity, impulsivity. It affects their executive function. And once you have a better understanding of all of this, this is going to be a game changer for your parenting. So if you like this video, click a like. If you want my coaching, go to raisethegame.com. If you want me to come to your school, go to raisethegame.com. Go to navigate-adhd.com. And remember, guys, day by day, we are raising the game.